The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask those to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda is discussion and/or vote to approve the school committee's recommendation for the $83 million school bond plans. Tonight, Toronto Architects is here, and Colliers is here as well. Oh, I'm sorry. I need an approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Motion by Mr. Hess to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Fiorello. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 6-0. Please note for the record, Mrs. Waters is not here at the moment. All right, so getting back to the discussion, we're going to be looking at some schematics that Toronto Architects has drawn up based on public comment last week. And then if the school committee so chooses tonight, we would just recommend that our vision of what we would like to see in the 21st century go to the building committee for the town, whose job is to manage this and present something back to the school committee and the town council for approval, and we move forward. But this is the vision of what we think works with redistricting in the school district and so forth. So with that said, Mr. Trotter, you can take the mic, and the school committee members can go down and sit in the audience.
Good evening. I'm going to present two options that address locating 3 tracks at Ashton Elementary School. As part of the presentation, though, I'd like to just go through all of the elementary schools and show you the basic preliminary layouts for all of those buildings. Okay, this is a little hard to see, but basically this is the similar chart that we presented last time, except that this shows that at Ashton we propose having 5 pre-Ks, and then we locate one of the pre-Ks at the transitional building at the high school. This would be incorporated into the early childhood pathway. Then Ashton is a straight 3-track school. B.F. Norton is a 2-track school. And the way that we have the same number of classrooms that we presented last time, but I think just to be clear, what we have is we call 2 of those classrooms transitional classrooms, and those are the classrooms that will allow for enrollment bumps along the way. Then community is reduced in size and has 4 tracks. Garvin has 3 tracks, and McLaughlin has 3 tracks. If you could raise that a little bit, Mike, please. Thank you. Okay, so as a result of this, this shows the expected peak enrollment and the capacity of the building and it at Ashton, and it shows that you will have room for 108 additional students to attend that building. At B.F. Norton, you have the expected peak enrollment, the capacity, and it shows that you have 43 additional students that could attend that building. At community, you have the capacity of the building and the enrollment of the building, and it shows that you have a minus 57 students, which would need to be relocated to another facility. And Garvin, you have 24 additional students, and at McLaughlin, you have minus 6 students. Oh, I have that's there. Okay. Okay, so these are the preliminary drawings. We start off with McLaughlin, and okay. I'm sorry, Mike. Okay, so the main entrance to the building is here. This is the entrance lobby, and in the discussions we had with RIDE, they wanted to have this 21st century media center hub in prominent spaces in the building. So this is located on the access entrance corridor. And this program is what we've developed to be provided at all of the elementary schools. And it includes a media center, and then directly adjacent, as close as possible, 3 Da Vinci rooms. Now, the 3 Da Vinci rooms will be designed so that one of them has more of a music component, more soundproofing. The other one has an art component, and the third one is focused on large group projects. So you see how based on the educational master plan, we locate houses for each one of the grades, and each grade has its learning commons. You see this happens for the first grades, second grade, third grades, and then this is the addition that has the 4th graders, 5th graders, and their learning commons. Sure. Okay, so these are very preliminary, and the design process, the goal is to incorporate the 21st century learning components with your educational program. Whatever you decide that's going to be, it's our job to make sure that those spaces are provided for you. So that's going to be part of the design moving forward. But Bob, if you wanted to add something.
I was just going to say, the design that is being presented to you this evening is not in conflict with the strategic plan. So we utilized the strategic plan as we did the visioning sessions with Dr. Frank Locker. So this will allow us to do more project-based learning, which is a trend that we are all in agreement. Our students need to have more exposure to.
Thank you. So, okay, the next building is Garvin. The main entrance to the building is here. The administration is located here. And what we're proposing is creating learning commons so that it's viewed as you enter the building. And then we provide the classrooms around that learning commons. You have the kindergarten house with its own learning commons, and then we renovate the existing cafeteria and enlarge it into the media center, the Vinci room area. We propose an addition for a cafeteria and new kitchen, and then we provide the additional Da Vinci rooms. And then upstairs, you see the same design where we arrange the classrooms around a learning commons. This is B.F. Norton. One of the major renovations that will take place in that school is that we are relocating the main entrance to the building to what is sort of the, oh, did I do it? Okay, the lower level. So you see, we will create a new entrance at grade level here and then relocate the administration area here. Yes, right now you have to go up this set of stairs and then enter the building at this point, and the administration is located here. So then the kindergartens and first graders around their learning commons. On the upper floors, we have the media center with the Da Vinci rooms, and then the second and third graders with the learning commons, and on the upper floors, another Da Vinci room. We locate here the transitional classrooms, and then the fourth and fifth graders around that learning commons. Community, the main entrance to the building is here. We show a relocated administration area here, which will have the desired security checkpoint. When you come in, you would be able to overlook through some windows this lower level. At the lower level, we show the media center, the Da Vinci rooms, and then the rest of this wing is for the first graders, second graders around the learning commons. As you come down this corridor, you have the kindergarten rooms with a new learning commons and a new kindergarten room. So from this point over, there's an addition. The addition will house a new cafeteria with a kitchen, a Da Vinci room, and then it will become one of the prominent entrances for parent drop-off from the rear of the school. Then the upstairs is arranged around classrooms and the learning commons. Okay, so this is the option at Ashton School. The main entrance to the building is located here. Again, on access, we have the media center, the Da Vinci rooms. We have classroom houses around the learning commons. And from this main corridor, also on access, we have additional classroom houses around the learning commons. And from this point over, it's the addition. So the Early Childhood Center would have its own entrance, control point with office, some breakout rooms. We arrange the pre-kindergarten rooms here with learning commons, and then the kindergarten, first graders, their learning commons, and these would be the restrooms for the first graders. And also we accommodate a Da Vinci room. So this is the scheme that has 3 tracks and provides 5 pre-Ks. Okay, sure. Yes, you're going to be seeing it in a minute. Okay. So this is the chart that describes the other option, and that option is to locate all of the pre-Ks at the transitional building. These numbers then basically is a straight 3 tracks, and all of this is the same as the previous scheme. These numbers are basically the same as the previous scheme, and the same thing you'll see from your charts. So that's the big difference between the 2 plans. Okay, and then the design for this option, all of the existing building is as I just described to you. That doesn't change. What changes is that it's a smaller addition where you can still have an entrance for the kindergarten wing. You have the 3 kindergartens, little learning commons, more of a learning commons for the first graders, restrooms for the first graders, the Da Vinci room, and some breakout rooms. And then at the transitional building, this shows that the pre-kindergartens would be located at the main level. So this is the main entrance to the building now. And what this shows is the design of a new entrance with a security vestibule for the district's office. Then this entrance would be restricted for the pre-K school, controlled by these doors so that that's a secured space. You have the pre-K offices, pre-K faculty areas, the pre-Ks, media center, some breakout rooms, a classroom for the high school pathways, and then some breakout rooms. So I think there's three big benefits of the second option. And that is that it has a fairly substantial lower cost than the one with all of the pre-Ks, the 5 pre-Ks at Ashton. So that's a big benefit in a project that we need to be very careful to control the cost. The other benefit that it has is that we would hope to do some of the renovations for the eventual pre-Ks at the beginning of the project, and that would make the building much more adequate for the swing space that's going to be used for the elementary schools. And then the third benefit is that the only building that appears to be eligible to receive the 5 additional bonus points from RIDE for improving the underutilization of a building is the high school. So if we want to seek getting those additional 5 points, we have to reduce the underutilization of the high school. By doing this, you really relocate that use to another building, another use, and so automatically you improve the utilization of the high school. So these are very preliminary thoughts, but I think that it's the right direction, that we need to start really investigating in detail with all of the issues that need to be addressed. That basically describes the 2 options.
We'd rather have it all together and not just one classroom aside. So could we talk about that?
Okay, so one of the things that we talked about was relocating the pre-Ks, the pre-kindergarten classrooms from Ashton Elementary School to the trans building, the building that we're in right now. The thinking is that, as you all know, we are expanding the number of pathway offerings to students. And one of the pathway offerings that we want to support is this early childhood pathway. So what we would be doing is providing students who have an interest in early childhood education with an opportunity to take all of the coursework associated with exposing them to that career. And it would provide students with an opportunity to actually work with staff in learning how that career actually functions. So that was a key component in our consideration. We, will make sure that there is separation from the high school students, and it just I know that Dr. Santa, who is actively involved in the administration of the preschool, supports this plan. what was your other question? Okay. Yes. The other issue that we have been talking a lot about is one of the ideas that we have with the Da Vinci rooms was that it would provide us the flexibility to use these rooms in different ways. And one of the ways that we would use a Da Vinci room, and the reason we call it Da Vinci is because it doesn't have to specifically be an art room or a music room or a STEM room or a STEAM room. STEAM, for those of you who don't know, STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. STEAM adds art to that acronym. So it's science, technology, engineering, art, and math. The STEAM rooms or the Da Vinci rooms would give us the flexibility to organize our space more efficiently. It also will provide an opportunity for the significant amount of professional development work that we do in our schools, and I think is one of the big reasons why we are improving the performance of our students, is because we provide a lot of opportunities for our staff, or actually demand a lot of time from our staff in improving their craft. So the Da Vinci rooms also give us the flexibility to do that. This plan, as you could see when Lewis was reviewing the student population in each of our schools, will provide more balance. Right now, as you all know, community school has 630 students, give or take a few students, and the next highest population of students in our elementary schools is right around 400. So there's a significant difference. This provides more balance, which we believe, and Mr. Damana, correct me if I'm wrong, in our calculations on actually scheduling students, I think this provides us with more flexibility. Is that accurate? Okay, so does that answer your question, Mr. Damana? And if, you know, like just to provide what I think is a helpful definition of what learning commons are. Some of you might be wondering how this space will be utilized, and I think this definition provides a really good idea of the potential and how this space can be used. Learning commons, also known as scholars' commons, information commons, or digital commons, are learning spaces similar to libraries and classrooms that share space for a number of things, including information technology, remote or online education, tutoring, collaboration, that's the big thing, content creation. We talked about makerspace in the last building, where students can make things, meetings, socialization, playing games, and studying. So there are lots, and that just gives you some sense of how these spaces can be used. And just one of the things that we have learned as part of our practice is one of the most important things that we can do as educators to improve our craft is to provide opportunities for meaningful collaboration for certified staff. And this layout that has been presented to you provides us with more opportunities for meaningful collaboration.
Okay. So we haven't seen any plans yet for the middle school or the middle schools or the high schools. And one of my questions is, we've got this design for introducing these learning commons in the elementary school and project-based learning at the elementary school. But then what happens when these kids come to middle school and to high school? And
So our plans will include these 21st century learning methods at the middle schools. We have preliminary plans that shows us creating houses around learning commons and providing the same type of Da Vinci rooms for the elementary schools. That's what I meant, thank you, for the middle schools. No. The high school renovation is focused on the transitional building to renovate those space to accommodate the career paths. It also concentrates on creating a new safe entrance for visitors and parent after school open, so that entry level will be renovated to accommodate that.
Talk about what other work is planned for the middle schools that you're going to present to the building committee and the school committee to look at, to, what your thoughts are on that?
Well, other than the ones I just mentioned, but you will have brand new science rooms, updated art rooms, music rooms, the security entrance, and so that you will see substantial change, not only to those, but also mechanical, technical, IT upgrades. And it's good, because I would question why we haven't addressed those issues yet. The functional capacity identified by the states in the Jacobs report has one of the middle schools at a 72% utilization, the other one at 82% utilization. So it's easier to incorporate these 21st century rooms. The focus has been at the elementary schools, because we knew that in order to incorporate those spaces, we were going to require additions. And it's not only the learning commons, but it's also in order to incorporate the size classrooms that RIDE requires. That's what's driving the elementary program.
Louis, can you talk about how it is determined that the high school is underutilized as far as space is concerned? Can you talk about how that is determined?
Sure. So there's two methods of determining the capacity of a building. One is the aspirational capacity, and that basically assigns a square foot number to a student and multiplies it times the number of students that you're going to enroll. The other one is, and this is the important one, because this is what determines whether you're eligible to receive the additional 5%, either to reduce overcrowding or to improve undercapacity. So RIDE uses the functional capacity to determine that. And that is determined by basically counting the number of classrooms that you have, applying the maximum class sizes that your teacher contract allows. At the elementary level, you use 100% utilization ratio for that. At the middle school and the high school, those additions get factored by 15% to allow for scheduling and class sizes. So that's the one, that's the way that functional capacities are determined.
Thank you.
You know, I have a question at the moment. We're going to go back up top here to the school committee, and then we can have an open discussion in regards to thoughts.
Public
comments,
or?
Just a quick one on financing. How does the financing get structured so that the elementary changes don't consume all of the resources available for middle and high school?
That's a good point, and I want to let Derek address that, because that's why we made him come all the way here.
Great.
Oh, perfect.
So it's certainly still being studied. I think what we hope to be able to get out of the next series of meetings with the architect is the rough approach to what the build out will be, and that will allow my team to start to look at the data and start to look at costing. So this is the vision, this is the path that we'd like to go down, and we'll carefully manage the budget. But that's likely going to require a series of conversations about prioritization to make sure that everybody is treated equally, that there's parity across the district. Because I don't have all of that data yet, I'm not prepared to be able to promise anything to you tonight. But that is an important point, and we will look at it.
If I could, making sure that we get to the end of the project and still have money to do all of them. So each project will be very carefully cost estimated. RIDE requires, and of course best practice dictates, that the cost estimates include escalation. So the projects that are going to be done on later years will be budgeted with escalation to make sure that they do it. And then the building committee is going to hold us to make sure that each project, each school is done for the amount that it was budgeted, to ensure that at the end of it, the last project gets built.
When would we expect the middle school projects to commence, like 2020?
Honestly, that hasn't been determined yet. So we need to do all that. We need to do the preliminary plans, figure out what work gets done first that makes sense, so we can do the shifting of students. But you will have an absolute answer to that as we develop stage 2, and it will be part of the package. For the approval of stage 2 will include all of the schedules of the construction.
And is there a no later than?
Yes, no later than 5 years.
5 years from when the shovel hits the ground or some start?
Completion.
Got it. Thanks. Thank you.
Else? So I think what we have here is maybe a vision for the school committee of how we want our schools to look for the 21st century. The school committee is going to discuss it tonight. And hopefully we will make a recommendation that Mr. Torado takes everything to the building committee with our thoughts, and yeah, I would like to see it go this way with the pre-K and so forth and the additions at the schools. And then the building committee will run with it and come back with a realistic plan. Yes, it'll work. No, it won't work for the school committee. And we all come up in an agreement. We have to be at RIDE by, I think it was November 21st is what the gentleman said to me today, with our stage 2 application. So the building committee's got to get involved. But the school committee needed this to know, does it work? Can we move children in the district, and where can we put them, and so forth? And Mr. Damano wanting to do the new schedule and STEM program in the elementary schools. Does it work? And so the school committee is going to discuss that tonight, freely, and see if we can come to an agreement on what our vision should be for the education of the children going forward. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. So I have been having some conversations with teachers, and we have been getting emails from parents. And I think it's important for everyone to know that we really are at ground zero. So, for example, we know that one of the things that we talked about in our last meeting was that the trans building is going to be used as a swing space. We need a space to house students while we do work at each one of the elementary schools. So, given that, we know that there are teachers who are going to who are here now, who are going to be impacted by that decision. So, we have a responsibility as part of this process to make sure that all of the questions that those who are going to be affected by that, all of those questions are answered. So it's a little premature at this point for us. We need to, get approval on whatever it is we decide we're going to do. We need to get approval first, and then we have already had conversations about going on the road and meeting with teachers in every building, with not just teachers, with all staff in every building, and that certainly could include parents who are impacted by the decisions we make as well, we know that we have a responsibility to answer questions. I'm sure that there are going to be things that are brought up that we didn't think of, because this is a significant project. So I just want people to know that there's a lot of work to be done, and there is a huge communication piece that will be involved in this. Because if I'm a teacher and I've been teaching in a classroom, my own classroom, for a long time, and then I learn that, that's going to change, I need to have some idea about how the move is going to affect me. So we understand our responsibility in presenting what we hope to do and reassuring folks and answering any questions that they may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was just wondering if, in addition to the classrooms and stuff, if any infrastructure is being looked at, like boilers and windows and lighting, and additionally any energy efficiency updates for the entire buildings?
Absolutely. So stage one included all of the deficiencies that had been found by the Jacobs report, the assessment that the state did, and previous stage twos that we have done. And those were mainly health, safety type projects, windows, roofs, all that. So a big portion of this project is addressing all those deficiencies.
I guess the school committee will go back up to the stage and we'll have a discussion about these ideas that Mr. Torado presented to us and whether it works for our vision for probably the next 50 years in Cumberland. So I can say for probably the last 12 weeks, there's been meetings up in the superintendent's office either every Thursday or every other Thursday. And the architect has thrown some ideas out there for the school district based on the demographic study and Mr. Lockhart's visiting sessions that we had to do for RIDE of where the school committee could go with the $83 million that the voters have approved. And it's not all $83 million will go to construction because there's all kinds of soft cost and money they're going to set aside for contingencies and so forth. But one of the big items the school committee had a while ago was how do we implement the new curriculum at the elementary schools with the STEM program? And there was a lot of dust up recently because we tried to get it going this year. And one of the issues we had was Mr. DeMona didn't have enough, I'm going to say capacity or at community to implement. It was the only school because it's so large to get it implemented. And of course, Ashton is was a two-track school and is the preschool center. So last week, the school committee members instructed the superintendent to talk to Torado about making Ashton the three-track school, and then they presented the other day to Dr. Santa, who was in the room at the time, Mr. D'Amato, the superintendent, the idea of moving the full pre-K center here, because it gives her room for expansion as well. We have 102 kids in the preschool center right now. There was a waiting list of 70 children, she said the other day. She's not ready to pull the trigger on bringing those 70 children here yet. We're waiting to see what RIDE does down the road, but it's sort of a plan we have to keep in the back of our mind if RIDE decides that we're going to have universal pre-K throughout the state. So it made sense for her if we're going to have a pathway for it as well here. So what's been presented tonight for school committee to discuss is, does that work for us? I mean, we still have capacity issues at community school, but we're going to have to look at moving some of those children. We have many children that are in Ashton, that should be going to Ashton, can't because they're going to community because there's no room. Same thing at Cumberland Hill as well, they're going to community. So we're going to have to look at the district maps to even that out and move children around. We have great elementary schools everywhere. And we're going to have to look at those district maps down the road and even it out. So with that said, I'll open it up to the school committee to ask any questions they may have in regards to this to Mr. Torado, the superintendent, or whoever it may be.
Okay, well, just speaking about the capacity issue, so what we have in front of us, it says that the capacity of community school is 576, but the enrollment is 633.
Right.
So is this meaning before any redistricting?
That is the number what it would be before redistricting. So it would only have a capacity of 576 children, even with the additions because of the way the rooms will get configured with the learning centers, medias, and so forth. So the school committee would have to move at least probably 70 children around the district to probably Ashton, Garvin, and so forth. We would have to do that down the road. There is just not capacity at community to do that, and if we kept it at that number, then it would be harder for Mr. Damana to implement the new schedule with the STEAM program at the elementary school there, at that school. And we want it for every school. Does that answer your
I
question?
didn't follow, I'm so sorry. I didn't follow that at all.
Well, right now, the enrollment at community is 633 children. Some of those children going there should have been going to Ashton. Some should have been going to Cumberland Hill. The school committee, in order to reduce the capacity down to under 576, if we go with this idea and give it to the building committee and see if they can make it work, the school committee is going to have to redistrict students out of that area. They are looking at, as I sent you an email, they're looking at maps right now to figure out where the children are that are attending those schools and where they could possibly go in relation to this vision that they have.
Right, okay. So the number that we have for the revised plan with the 3 tracks at Ashton and 4 tracks at community still has the enrollment of 633. So that's, oh, my mic. Sorry, Mike, thank you. So the 633 that Toronto has does not take into consideration the redistricting. So we know that the students will need to be redistricted.
Right, that's a job of the school committee to decide
Right.
who gets redistricted
Right.
and where.
So Toronto is telling us, based on the 4 tracks, we'll have a capacity of 576. So we'll
Correct.
need to manage to 576,
Right.
so.
Anyone else have any questions? How does everyone feel about moving the pre-K center to the transitional building and giving Dr. Santa some extra room
What'd you say?
for expansion? Mr. Fiorelli, you have a thought?
Yes, I do. This is really not a new idea. I know we've had some discussion about moving the preschool up to the trans building a couple of years ago. The question, of course, was where would the money come from, so that we can increase the size of Ashton. My concern, though, is BF Norton is going to go down to a 2-track school with 2 floating rooms, plus the special ed room would stay where it is. That program would stay there. Yeah. Okay.
No,
Well, yeah.
4th and 5th grade.
Yeah. It fluctuates.
Again, I think at BF Norton, because you're creating these rooms, some of those children would get moved over to Garvin as well. You know, it's a vision to lower the amount of children. You know, BF Norton, I mean, it would be nice if we could build a nice large addition, but we're not going to be able to afford. I don't think the building committee will make that recommendation to us to build a big addition, because there is no space at the moment for it.
And I think the other part of this is, we've known for the last at least 2 years that the district needs to do a full comprehensive redistricting, which hasn't been done in a very long time. So I think that no matter what we do, that's going to have to be a part of the plan anyways, so.
Oops. Go ahead.
I have a question about the learning commons.
What school?
All of
Anyone,
them, just in general, learning commons in elementary schools. I know that the administration has gone and visited some, I don't know if they've visited elementary schools, but have visited some high-achieving schools in other parts of the country. And is the learning common, have you seen that at another school, at other high-achieving schools? And if so, how can you describe the impact it has? I'll just let you know that I'm a little not totally sold on the idea of learning commons at the elementary school level. I'd be more sold on it on the upper school level.
So, good evening, everyone. I cannot speak to learning commons at the elementary level specifically. Alex Prignano and Mr. Mitchell attended and visited schools in Pawtucket and saw the learning commons there. But myself and a team of individuals, Adolfo Costa, who's in the audience, we visited Adelaide Stevenson High School, and that is in Chicago, Illinois, and we did get to see the learning common concept. In fact, that entire school is built around the premise of professional learning communities. And at the secondary level, they appeared to fit into that 21st century model and work very, very well within their instructional model. So I could see that there. When I saw the plans for the elementary level, and we had discussions just the other day around the learning commons, we had asked the question as to whether or not every grade level would need, you know, those learning commons. And the reason why I posed the question was because we have a very strict curriculum at the elementary level in terms of time. We have regulations, for lack of a better term, around how much time we allow for English, math, science, and those types of things. So I'm going to need professional development and do some research on how learning commons would be utilized at the elementary level and allow for keeping our trajectory and rigor for what we're doing. B, there would be professional development that we would have to invest in as a district for teachers on, you know, how to maximize those spaces. That's the best response that I can give you.
Okay, but our plans don't have adding learning commons at our high school, right? And, you know, where you've seen success in that has been at the upper level.
Secondary level,
So,
yeah.
you know, we start this idea of learning commons at the elementary level, which I don't know, like I said, I'm not totally sold on it at the elementary level. And then we move up into the upper levels, and now we don't have that anymore. When we talk about project-based learning as well, project-based learning is something I think that we are having or would have more success at the upper level than at the lower level for many of the reasons that you already just stated in terms of the regulations and requirements of how we have to deliver an elementary education. So I'm concerned about what the precedent we're gonna set at the elementary level that we're not following through on all the way up. And it just makes me wonder whether we should put a little more of that focus at the upper level and then free up some of this learning common stuff for maybe, I don't know, more classrooms or something else that we might need. I'm just not I'm not seeing the connection all the way through, because we should be, of course, looking at this as the whole ecosystem of our curriculum and education and what we're trying to achieve.
Sure, that's fair. I can't speak for the superintendent or the architect. It sounded to me in that meeting that RIDE had some pieces that they wanted to see in place in terms of what they define as a 21st century building and regulations around that. And I'm not sure if you know, in Pawtucket, you learned anything about that, Mr. Mitchell, around the learning commons of what they and how they utilize it. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I don't have a response for that piece.
Sure.
Thank you. And I think that the reason why RIDE wants to ensure that these learning commons are introduced at the possible earliest time is because students need to learn how to work in that environment. There's been other states that have introduced learning commons at the middle schools and high schools, and they found them to be unsuccessful because it's very difficult to have a student that hasn't been brought up in learning that method just automatically assigned to that. So they're pretty flexible at the pre-K level and at the K level. By first grade, they want to make sure that you start introducing learning commons. I've asked Mike if he could tap into YouTube. There's a good YouTube video about an elementary school in Middletown, Forest Avenue Elementary School, that Frank Lockhart was involved in designing, and it really explains the whole concept of the learning commons at the elementary level. It'd be great if oh, you're still looking for that. I'm gonna go help him.
So just to, I don't know if this is going to clarify this issue in any way, but I have in front of me a list of things that were agreed upon by all of the individuals who are a part of the visioning process. And the title of this particular section, and so this is a part of the document that was created by those 40 plus folks, students, staff, teachers, administrators, parents, community members who worked for 2 days developing a vision for the district. And here are some of the things that we agreed we wanted to include as part of our teaching and learning moving forward. So I think it might be easier to envision these kinds of things taking place in a space that is more conducive to accommodate these kinds of things. So small group work, student collaboration is something that comes up all the time. These are the things that everyone agreed to. Project-based learning, student presentations, maker spaces, where students make things, including in STEM and STEAM, thematic integrated learning, integrated arts learning, social emotional learning. And specifically at the elementary level, it included those things: project-based learning, small group work, student collaboration, integrated arts learning, social emotional learning, blended learning, flipped classroom. All of these things were considered. And one of the things that Mr. Damana and I have talked at length about is when we create these spaces, teachers are going to have to be provided with some professional development on how to utilize these spaces most efficiently. So we realize that is going to be a big part of our work moving forward. So I don't, just to comment on your concern, Mrs. Friedman, about the high school, I think your point is well taken. I do think that there are spaces currently in the high school where these opportunities do exist. As you may recall, we have had this vision for changing what has historically been a library, media center, into a commons kind of an area where, you know, media, I've seen it described in some of the literature that I have reviewed on these learning commons, that library media centers are becoming less of a place of a tome for books and texts and those kinds of things, and they're becoming a more lively place where there is an opportunity for students to collaborate, talk openly, and work with one another on the projects that they have been assigned. So I just think that there is this transformation taking place, and media centers are really changing in the way that we have, from the way that we have historically known them.
I mean, I know there's no plans yet for, or I should say a vision for the middle schools and the high school, but, you know, we do have the area, the shop area that was years ago taken away from the children and used for maintenance. And those areas there, possibly if the building committee can find the money for it and it works for us, we could convert those areas back to classroom areas in the high school and find a different location for the maintenance people than using those garage areas right now. So there are ideas out there that we would have to vet with the building committee to see if it works and see if it fits in the plan, you know, with financing and so forth to do it. This is only, you know, after going through plan after plan to figure out enrollment and stuff for the school committee, does this work for us? Do we want to make Ashton a 3-track school? Do we want to, you know, do the security enhancements and the classrooms as presented by Mr. Torado? He has to give it all to the building committee now and make it all work for them and answer their questions. I mean, ours was, we got to give the building committee some idea where we would like to go, and then have the building committee take that vision and go with it. So, go ahead.
The one thing that's hard for me right now is making, I feel like we have a lot of things thought out around the elementary schools, but we're not seeing the rest of the picture for the middle and the high school. And that, you know, I can't make an overall assessment with only knowing this much of it and not all of it, to know how this all connects together. It's easy to look at one thing and say, oh yeah, that sounds great. Oh yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great too. But I'm worried about what's gonna happen or not happen at the middle schools and the high school.
I mean,
And you know, I know when they do this stage 2 submission, I mean, we've already asked about what the estimated costs are, which, I mean, I haven't seen. How much are we talking for each of these schools, and then how much are we talking for the middle and the high schools? You know, in order to send something forward or at some point to approve it to be submitted, yeah, we gotta know all of that.
Yeah, but the you know, as the mayor's talked about as well for the building committee, that's their job to figure out the cost. And Torado can't go to them and say, here's their vision, can we work with this, does it work? Until at least he gets an idea of what direction we want to go. You know, he can't give us a price to do Ashton if we don't know whether we're going to have the pre-K there or not. He can't give us a price to do community if we're not in agreement that this committee or some part of this committee down the road is going to redistrict some of those students, move them around, move them back to their home schools. We don't have that number. We're not going to have that. Torado's never had that number. He can give us a number tonight based on square footage, what it would cost, brand new construction, but that's for the building committee to decide what they're going to do with the brand new construction. Remodeling, anything can happen when you remodel. Open up a ceiling, we find more asbestos, something's rotted, electrical has to be updated. I mean, I see a concern. The mayor has said it numerous times in these Thursday meetings. How do you get to the end and make sure there's enough money to get there? And that'll be for Colliers and Torado to make a presentation to the building committee that works, because the building committee has to make another presentation back to us and the town council before we can submit the Stage 2 application.
Can-
Go ahead.
Can I comment?
Oh, yeah.
I feel the same as Karen. I find that it's difficult to make a vote to say, yes, do this, without knowing what the ramifications are down the road. So they've done everything they asked except for bringing back costs. We asked for the 3-track school. I'm happy with what I see so far, but it's hard for me to vote yes, proceed, without knowing what the ramifications are. Like, is my vote yes, Ashton 3-track school, gonna affect what we can do at the high school later down the road? That's why we need to see the big picture. And to what Mrs. Bulio said earlier, how do we make sure those funds are allocated for each project rather than as a whole, and then you're left with nothing at the end? So, I mean, I completely understand that we can't have those kinds of figures, but we can get a ballpark. Like, does the construction at Ashton, does putting the preschool in the high school, how do those things affect what projects we can feasibly do?
Well,
Mr. Hess said last week at our meeting, we may find that we're not able to do as much as we want, so let's know that.
right, but we're not tasked with the money end of it. This is a vision of what we want to get accomplished, and the building committee needs to figure it out with Toronto, with Colliers, the funding for it, and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, we're going to know that in the next month or so when the building committee comes back to us. They have to go back to RIDE by November 21st, is what the gentleman said to me today, and present the Stage 2 application. At that time, RIDE's going to come, before that, RIDE's going to come out to the building committee. They're going to walk buildings, they're going to walk schools, they're going to look at them, the ideas about additions and so forth, and come up with realistic numbers to see if it's going to work. We don't know what the cost is going to be. RIDE has told us that, they told Mr. Torado that the last 2 years of the plan, years 4 and 5, we had to go out to bid, or the building committee has to go out to bid in year 3. And, Mr. Torado said, we got to factor in inflation. Derek did about inflation for these projects going on. That's for the building committee to decide.
Sure.
Paul, but there already are like loose plans or some preliminary plans for middle and high school. Like, we haven't seen what that is, but there already are plans in place.
Let me ask, Mr. Torado, do you have any drawings or schematics of what you think would fit in these 2 middle schools?
Yes, we have layouts for the 2 middle schools. For the high school, the focus was on identifying the CTEs that are going to be implemented in the future. One of the things that we wanted to do right away was to have Frank Lucker come in for a half-day of visioning sessions that focused just on the high school. But in the meantime, we need to get started on the elementary schools. Please remember that RIDE gave us the deadline of November to submit a Stage 2. If not, the option is not being pushed to February. The option is starting over again by submitting a Stage 1. So they have this 1-year deadline that if you don't submit Stage 2 a year from the time that you submitted Stage 1, it starts all over again. I don't want to have the impression that if you direct this building committee to have us start looking at these options, it's going to shut off all the rest of the work. We're working at the middle schools right now. We're working on those layouts, and we would be back to show the building committee and you in a couple of weeks what those plans are. But in the meantime, I really encourage you to let us move forward, because the deadline, there's an incredible amount of work that needs to be done, and the deadline is right around the corner for us.
So if we approve this portion to move forward, and then the next step during Stage 2, you're going to be working on costs. So then we will start to see what these costs are going to look like. Is it going to be on the whole district, or are the costs that will be presented first based on only the elementary work? You know what I mean? Like, we're being presented the elementary, so will the budgeting show just the elementary work? Or once you start working on the whole district-wide project, we'll see, like, the budget for each project from like elementary through high school?
We will have some very preliminary budgets for the whole project.
The whole thing, okay.
The whole project. However, we won't have real good estimates until we design enough detail into the plans that a cost estimate maker can accurately identify those costs. For that, we need to start that process.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Salvatore.
Mr. Chair, what is your recommendation to the school committee tonight on what we need to get done tonight, as it also reflects of what the mayor or the town council wants to see?
Well, for me, who's been attending all these Thursday meetings with Mr. Fiorello as well and others in the room, this is just a vision for the school committee. I've said it before, this has to go to the building committee with our vision and have them flesh it out. Does it work? It doesn't work? We can do this at the schools, we can't do that at the schools, and come up with a plan. You know, the gentleman from RIDE told me today that they'll have walking the schools, they'll look at what's been presented, and then they'll start reviewing it. I mean, I understand everyone here, and it's been said before, you know, we've got to get to the end. There has to be a way that not just all the money goes to elementary and we get down to the middle school and it's like, sorry, we ran out of money. Or you get to the high school, sorry, we can't put security in here anymore, we can't do any of that. There has to be a start. And my recommendation as a school committee, you know, just vote to forward this presentation to the building committee and let the building committee run with it. They're gonna have to come back to us with a presentation so we can vote on it, and then they have to bring it to the town council so they can vote on it.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I noticed that the mayor is here. I'd like to welcome the mayor up to the podium to provide some input on this. Thank you, Mayor.
Jeff Mata, 12 Scotia Drive. So I think with this is, I feel like a lot of times I'm like always bringing, like I'm trying to, you know, I don't know what it is actually. I'm trying to figure out what my spot is. But I think I went to RIDE yesterday. Was it yesterday? I went to RIDE yesterday. And we're not the only community that did it, but the process is kind of backwards. We got voter approval before we even identified properly like the need. Like the very first step, if you follow their process, as far as a necessity of school construction and the process and the timeline is to identify your team, which is the building committee. And then there's the letter of intent. And then, so once you get through stage one, and the reason I went was stage one to stage two, I mean, you know, I really had no idea exactly of the process, so I just wanted to educate myself. But at that point in time, you have 1 year. But the way it's supposed to work is all this is supposed to happen first, right? We identify the needs, then you develop a solution, and then you take it to the voters and ask for approval. So it should have been, in my mind, I think, and the way it's perfectly, or the way the procedure is set up, is that you don't go to the voters unless the voters know exactly what you need. You've hashed it out. The building committee has gone through the steps that are required. And then you go to the voters and you say, we're going to spend, I don't know, $123 million. And they say yes, and all this has taken care of itself. What happened is we went for voter approval for $83 million. It was really not, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody, but really with not a clear idea. I would argue that most people who went to the booth that day thought it was $83 million that we, with reimbursements, would only cost $29 million, and that's all they really knew. They didn't really know much else about it, right? And that is a great deal, and I don't want to diminish this as it is a great opportunity, and I think that we will do well with that opportunity. But I think that's how it should have happened, and I think RIDE agrees that that's how it should happen. We are not the only one who did it, because there was this rush to try to get in front, because there was this thought that there's only so much money. And, you know, it's like everything else, right? We got to be first in line, or we got to get positioned in line. And, but it really wasn't that. That was the pay-go money. Everybody, so it's $250 million. Well, if if this community takes 90, it's down to 160, and if they take 100, there's only 60, and we're going to get nothing. And so regardless, and it doesn't matter because we're here now. I honestly don't believe you should take any action tonight. I think we should go back to the process, and it's going to be tight, but we've got till November 21st because the way it works is you have the year. Now, in hindsight, I wish I'd gone the ride sooner. I wish it wasn't yesterday, because obviously these regulations are not new. They have been around. They were around when the town had $5 million master leases, subject to the same exact process, same thing. So these are not new. And had we known that, I will admit that we probably wouldn't have spent as much time or delayed with the architect issue as we did, because we expended a lot of time doing nothing. So, my feeling is that why would you vote for something that clearly at this point you don't really know what it is? So I wouldn't vote on it. And actually, I would argue that I don't think it's appropriate that you do. I think it's that by November 21st, the building committee is going to have to really make up for lost time and get something to you that you can support. Now, and the town council as well. So you have to remember, many of the participants of the building committee are the very same people. Your superintendent's on that committee, your assistant superintendent, and the way it's designed, that it is heavily populated by school administration, school personnel.
Mayor, wouldn't you agree that the school committee's got to give you some idea, the building committee, of what our vision should be for these schools? I mean,
Yeah.
does building committee want to take away the votes of the school committee on this?
No, I see.
And
The
decide?
one thing that I thought about on the way down here that I will be defensive about is that this is not a power grab, because to be quite honest with you, I have a big job right now, and so I honestly don't need another big job. So don't look at it as if it's a power grab. I didn't make the rules. I didn't, this timeline and the way this is supposed to go down and the checklist that is provided by RIDE, I did not make them. But I am obligated to follow them, and I will follow them. So the building committees, these same meetings are public meetings just like these are. Everybody can go, anybody can go. Why would the superintendent and the assistant superintendent not drive the discussion inside the building committee that you would want them to drive?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So my understanding is our vote tonight is simply to say to the building committee, proceed.
Yeah, I just think it.
Which is,
Oh, it's fine. I
It's
just
not-
think it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
I mean, the
Right.
gentleman,
Committee has to do that anyway.
it's going to happen
Don't need us to
anyway.
tell them.
Right,
the
right.
gentleman from RIDE that I spoke to today said that the school committee can vote to send this to the building committee as our vision, and the building committee takes that vision and works from there. Mrs. Friedman, I understand that you've got issues, you want to know about cost and things like that. I'd love to know the cost as well, but is the
Well,
vision?
what I want to make sure, and if I put everything else aside, I want to make sure that our vision is going to support our achievement and strategic goals of ultimately becoming, forget top 10, forget top 5, get us, top number 1 in the state. I need reassurance, and this isn't, I need reassurance that our strategic vision and our achievement vision and our buildings all come together in concert. And I'm feeling like just me personally, I cannot say, yes, this is what is going to get us there. And so this can go to the building committee, but certainly in my opinion, we need to spend more time making sure that from an achievement perspective, that this is in support of that. And that's where I'm not.
And just if I could just interject, Mr. Chairman, remember, it has to pass the school committee. So, and look, not that anybody wants to hear that, but you don't want to pass anything that you don't think is part of your overall vision, you just wouldn't approve it. If it delayed it a year, it's better to do it right than to just get it done, right? So that's why I think the more that you just, calm down and look at it, that's why you see that there is this timeline, because it makes a lot of sense. But so it was billed as a once in a generation opportunity, and we jumped, okay? And so that's fine. Like but now even the way they explained it to me, now we want to bring you back to the starting line. And as I said, we probably should have gotten there, and if it was my job, then I apologize for not getting there. I just assumed that what was going on was the procedure. I have had a lot of, like as I stated, I have a big job, so if I missed this one, I really don't think I did, but if I did, I apologize. But you have to bring it back to that, and you have to make sure you get what you think matches your achievement vision and all the other things that you do before you would support it. And so our goal collectively is by November 21st to get that accomplished. I'd say if you can't get that accomplished, why would I support that?
Mr. Chair. I agree with the mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And also, I know we can put together a special meeting within 48 hours if we need to. So my recommendation, I'd like to make a motion to table the school committee's recommendations for the $83 million school construction bond plans. This way, it'll put it back into the building committee.
Mr.
with a vote
Salvatore
on that.
makes a motion to table. Is there a second for discussion?
Well, second for discussion,
Go ahead.
just so I understand what that means. I mean, we're saying this has to go to the building committee anyways.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to, doesn't need a vote by us to go to the building committee, but I think we need to make sure that whatever happens next with the building committee, that we have all the right people who are at the table for that, and not necessarily always on the committee, but engaged in the process. If we have to move really quickly, which it's feeling like to me, we have to move really quickly, then we're going to need to really dig in. But there isn't any action for us to take tonight, except that the building committee has to.
And we can, Mr. Chair, and we can provide to the building committee the updated revised numbers.
Absolutely.
Provided by Toronto that we asked them to do, that they came back and provided. I'm happy with these numbers.
I mean, I agree, we're giving this to the building committee, but the question you have to ask yourselves tonight, do you agree you want to make Ashton a three-track school? Do you agree you want to move the pre-K center to the transitional building and house it here? Do you agree that, you want to do the additions at community school for the new cafeteria, so there's not 6 lunches and starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, wherever it may be that they start, and making those changes? That's the idea for tonight. Do you agree on these changes? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Mr. Chair.
So, go ahead, Mr. Hess.
So I understand what you're saying, but what we can't answer is the other side of it. If the decision to make Ashton a 3-track school and to bring the pre-K over here and all of those things that you brought up means that we can't do anything at the high school and the middle school, that would change the calculus.
But, Mr. Hess, we don't know that until Toronto and Colliers can get some work involved, putting something to numbers. Without numbers, we don't know that. And we still have to vote again to approve whatever the building committee gives us. I mean, there's a lot of work has been going on here for months in regards to trying to get something that's presentable to the school committee that works, based on the demographic study and the vision and sessions that happened. And last week where we said, no, wait a minute, we want Ashton to go to a 3-track school. A lot of work is going involved. You're asking for cost estimates and numbers. I don't believe they can give it to us yet until they sit down with the building committee and have a direction where we would like to go.
Mr.
I
Chair.
mean, this is for, where do we want to go as a school committee? Do we want to, just put it aside and wait a year? Then we wait a year. Give it to the next school committee in November. But we're going to have to start somewhere. I mean, you just can't tell the building committee, go ahead, just, you come back with a plan and see if we like it. At least we gotta work collaboratively. I've been saying this for months. We need to have a joint building committee and school committee meeting, and nothing happened. I've been sending the school committee members notes every Thursday in regards to what happens at these ad hoc, or whatever you wanna call them, meetings. And, you know, we're not prepared to do anything right now. If that's the case, fine. Mr. Fiorello made a motion, you seconded for discussion. I mean, I'm sorry, Mr. Salvatore made a motion, you seconded, Mrs. Friedman.
Mr. Chair.
If there's any more discussion,
I would like to say, so I speak for myself, I am not an educator. I have to rely on the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the principal, Colliers, Mr. Torado, everyone to come to us. And I feel they have to justify it to me on what's best for these schools. Mrs. Butler's here as well. They all have input as teachers, parents, and also myself. That's how I feel. That's my stance on it. So I rely on the educators to convince me on what's best for the growth of these schools.
but that's what they've been doing for months right now on Thursdays.
I agree. So we bring it to, I feel that it goes to the building committee. They can sharpen it up on what the building committee does. It comes to us, it comes to the council, it goes to the mayor.
That's right.
So I made a motion. We have a second. Mr. Chair?
Any other discussion?
Well, I'm sorry, but yes.
Donato?
It sounds like there's a lot of, at least preliminary support for that second option, which again is bringing the pre-K here and all of that. If that is the plan that, say, we wanted to explore, and it comes back that it is too expensive to follow through on the projects through to the end of high school, then at that point, we would have to basically start over. Is that correct?
You'd have to look at additional options
Okay.
of how to make it all work
But we have to start somewhere.
based on the money that the voters have approved. And what Colliers has stated they need, that they wish the building committee would hold in reserve for anything that may happen. So there's only a limited amount of funds that they're gonna work with right away. And it's up to the school committee to at least like a plan. I mean, that's what the superintendent has been working on, and, and they listened to us last Thursday, came back with other options, and I know Mrs. Friedman wants to know how it all fits into achievement. I mean, the classrooms aren't gonna change, basically. We're adding these learning centers, the common areas, Da Vinci areas, we're adding them in to every classroom. I mean, every elementary school. We're gonna add them into the middle school.
But I haven't seen the connection yet between that and the rigor of the curriculum and what we want to achieve in those schools. I know they sound like good ideas, and I don't want to be the naysayer on it, but this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity we have here, and it's an important task to make sure we get this right. And I don't think it's fair for any of us to feel like we're being rushed into a multi-generational decision here. And if I'm not comfortable with it, then I'm going to need to spend time probably with Bob and Tony, and I want to dig into this and say, okay, show me how this ecosystem and the whole holistic thing works. And let's talk about the whole thing. I'm not comfortable with just, we're spending so much time looking at the elementary schools. I don't even know what's going to happen over here at the middle and the high school. And how can you do that? And I know we have deadlines and all that and everything, but this is a humongous responsibility to make sure we spend the time. And I know everyone's getting frustrated because we keep talking about this, but there's nothing more important that we could be talking about. And so we have to spend the time and talk about it and figure it out. So now I'm getting frustrated.
Yeah, my question is then, when the building committee meets, whenever that's going to be, whether it's next week or whatever, what are they discussing?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure what they're gonna discuss. They're gonna have a plan presented to them by Torado, I guess, and Colliers, and they'll go to work doing something. I mean, I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Matt.
Yeah, so I don't know what motivation you think we would have to not do something that you want us to do. That's at the heart of it to me. It's like, why would we do that? Why would the building committee, it's like we're this other entity. It's like, oh, it's the building committee. I mean, the building committee, as I said, the way RIDE sets that building committee up is clearly, I mean, there's a town-wide component there, but it is clearly dominated by the administration and by the people who are going to be, using these structures and who are charged with the responsibility of educating our youth. So, I think we have to stop and make it seem like this, like it's a us versus them thing or whatever it is. And what are we going to discuss? I mean, there's obviously enough unknowns right now but I mean, if you feel like, I don't know, I get this feeling you just, you want to check the box, which fine. I mean, I would advocate that you don't need to check the box. We're here. We know, we've been to the meetings. We know what the questions are. We know if you, obviously, we're not going to make the decision to redistrict or anything like that. So what are we going to do? We're going to leave this meeting. It didn't get voted on, and then we're going to have a building committee meeting, and all of a sudden we're going to throw something. It's going to be the same thing that you're talking about now.
I have the biggest fear out of all of this of giving the building committee a blank piece of paper with no ideas from the school committee how we would like to proceed. The superintendent makes recommendations to the school committee. We decide on his recommendations, and he's given preliminary recommendation that he likes the plan, the way it works. Mr. DeMana likes the plan, Dr. Santa likes the plan, but I fear we're giving you a blank piece of paper to work from. At least I want to be able to give you something that says, we'd like to see Ashton become a 3-track school and move the preschool center up here and reduce some overcrowding.
Okay.
Can you make it happen? I just fear we're going to give you a blank piece of paper because we didn't meet, for achievement or something to discuss the middle school. I understand, it's an issue. The high school is an issue that we want to get down on paper. The principal was here momentarily for the high school. There he is over there. He'd like to know what the plan is for the high school as well.
No, then I'm fine.
that's all.
I'm fine. It's not like if that makes you feel better, because I mean, giving us a blank piece of paper, I don't understand that because we're going to get the same plan that but if you feel better, but you're never going to put enough recommendations down tonight to cover the whole deal because you don't even know the whole deal.
I agree.
So when you pick your recommendations tonight, are you going to leave a couple of spots open for you to interject later? Because we're going to need you to anyway. So, but if you feel better, if there's some comfort, I'm all about that. If there's some comfort where, hey, at least we put our flag in the ground and we want this, you're going to have it anyway. But if it makes it better for you to do that, then vote on some recommendations that you want to vote on. But I mean,
We have a
clearly, we're
motion,
not
we have
going
a
to go and
second,
say, oh, you know
so-
what? Let's make Ashton a two. It's not going to happen. But if you feel better, then that's okay.
We have a motion, we have a second. Mrs. Bolio, you wanted to comment?
So as someone who's been involved with school bond renovations a few years back, it's definitely a difficult conversation. And, getting to listen to all your testimony, I think is really key. Take your time, do it right. I think the building committee is going to have some of the school representatives on the building committee. And so as such, Superintendent Mitchell will be engaging with the school committee to say, we're able to do the 3-track school thing. We've done some costing on the middle school pieces. We've worked to do, the aspects of the high school that we think need to change. I think there's a fear that if there's any sort of vote tonight, that vote might be premature because you don't have all the information. But I think the reality is none of us have all the information. And I think what we're trying to work against is a 1-month timeline just sandwich it all in, and I think that's gonna, the building committee could say tomorrow, we can't make that happen. And so then you're waiting a year, but that's not a bad thing, because then you have the opportunity to get it right and to do it well, and to not feel rushed, and not to feel like the decisions you're making are shortchanged or without making decisions in a vacuum. So if you, and clearly the building, there are building committee members here, Mr. Mitchell's here, so he represents both roles. Absolutely, if they can't deliver it for the cost, you're gonna have to go back and think about it. So I think time can work against you and it can work in your favor. And, part of the charge may be to the building committee, we wanna get it right, we wanna do it well. So if it's gonna take a little bit more time, we as a school committee can live with that extra year. Thanks.
Mr. Shaw?
Thank you, Bob Shaw, 38 Plant Street. I wanted to come up here to support the decision of taking your time and getting it right. As someone who really stood behind this, traveled to schools over a year ago with superintendent, advocating, the fact that we don't know all the information, when we're standing up here talking about plans that weren't even in the conversation when we were advocating for the once-in-a-generation opportunity, there was multiple buckets that are on that list that we look to fix in this town. It's not just, what we're talking about here today is changing the infrastructure and so 21st century learning was just one bucket of points of reimbursement. And to the point of, I forgot who the gentleman that was here that asked, is there other things on the list to get done? That's a major part of this once-in-a-generation thing, to get this district back up to par from years and years of neglect to its infrastructure. Yes, the 21st century part of it is a very important part. I'll still have a child in this school, hopefully in 5 years, to see that part. But don't forget that the majority of this $83 million too is to right a wrong or fix and bring up to date the buildings in this district too. I think there's still plenty of time. We could possibly get something done before the first deadline, but everyone's right. Get it right. We don't want to end up with egg on our face because we decided to rush it. And everyone will have the most information that they can at that time to make the best decision, just like we did over a year ago, advocating for what we thought was the best decision for this town was to vote for the $83 million, and we got overwhelming support. So we want to make sure that we do right by the taxpayers and put that money to use in the right way. So, thank you.
Gentleman behind him?
Just a quick question. And excuse me for my ignorance, but were the teachers involved? Did anyone ask the teachers what they wanted for their classrooms? This is a basic question. Like, did
They were
the
part of the
actual
vision
teachers
center.
working in the classrooms, did someone say, hey, what is it that you want in your classroom? Were they able to put forth that input? That's a question. I'm just posing that question.
Mr. Chair.
They were-
Mr. Torado, that's his specialty. Collier's the superintendent.
Yeah, so the visioning sessions had people from the school administration, teachers, parents, and students. There was broad input from all of those regarding the educational master plan.
I'm glad to hear that. That's really important. Because, as a parent, my child, entering kindergarten, they've been trying to change the rug in the kindergarten for several years now. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to do that. The rug is absolutely filthy. My wife and I basically offered to pay for it. But there's a whole schematic and procedure by which they have to put through a formal item to get into the budget, et cetera, et cetera. It's like long, drawn-out kind of bureaucratic process, which, but I know that that's something that the teacher in that classroom wants to get done. Probably cost a couple $100s. But the question I had was, they are making plans. I think it's great. I'm very thankful that we have this tremendous opportunity going forward. I just want to make sure that the teachers in the classroom have their input too.
Hi. My questions kind of go backwards a little bit. First, as far as moving the preschool here, which I think is a great idea, did they do long-term as far as enrollment on how it would affect the high school classes in the future? Because last year we had the biggest enrollment, then this year we have the biggest enrollment. So what happens when these elementary kids get to high school? Is there going to be room for all of them?
Based on the demographic study that was done, yes, there will be room.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, yeah, the reason for the demographic study is to give us amazingly accurate student enrollment for, actually the study was for the next 10 years. And we've learned that there will not be a significant fluctuation in student enrollment in each of the 10 years. But I think the Department RIDE, as part of this process, wants student enrollment numbers 5 years out, and that was taken into consideration when the plan was developed.
That the current biggest classes will have room when they get to the high school?
Yes.
Okay. Second, as far as redistricting goes, I think I asked this question last time. I don't know if it was talked about. Would we be redistricting before the construction started on the elementary schools, so that if a child has already been relocated to the trans and then gets redistricted and then gets relocated back to the trans again, especially if there's a gap in between, so they go to the trans to Cumberland Hill, let's say, then back to the trans because they're at Community or Ashton or whatever way. I would assume if we want to start this next year, we would probably redistrict for next year, so that doesn't happen, but I don't know if that's been talked about.
I don't think anything's going to start next year.
Or the year after, but we would
But the year
redistrict.
after, But it's a lot of details that still have to be worked out once we know a building schedule from the building committee of what they think and how it's going to work. And then we have to sit down with the parents, the teachers, the building principals, and figure out how we would move students and where and so forth. That has not been completely worked out yet because we don't know basically how many students we would move out of community or redistrict from community. We don't know that yet. All this was to help us get an idea of what it's going to look like down the road if the school committee agrees, on something, on this concept, this vision. So it hasn't been worked out yet. There's a lot of work. Mrs. Bernardo had emailed me about getting a public group together in regards to talking about this so that parents and everyone knows what's happening months down the road, 6, 7, 8 months down the road, so everyone's on the same plan going forward, so there's no surprises and go from there, but it hasn't been completely worked out yet. They've only been working on this and not the small, I don't want to say the nitty-gritty stuff but it's the most important stuff is having everybody on board and understands what's going to happen.
So in redistricting, obviously we look at the big picture, all of Cumberland, every level, to do what's best for everybody, but will that be stuck to once redistricting from, I don't know, I was not in the school system at the time, but the last time it was redistricted, there was some arguments and people were allowed to stay in their current school, and that's not fair to those students in that school who would have moved or not, so now they're class level and they're at max capacity. So if we redistrict, are we going to stick to those districts?
I think
or are they up in the air for people who want to fight it?
I think the recommendation for any redistricting would come from the superintendent's office first in regards to what he believes is best for the children. I can't speak for the school committee today or a year from now because I don't know who's going to be on the school committee at that time. We'll hope that, that if a school committee votes to do something, that the next committee follows through as well, but you can't guarantee, I can't guarantee that tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Bolio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and school committee members. So as somebody who has been asked to sit on the building committee, I'd be looking to do what, basically try to achieve the goals that have been set out for the committee by the, the educators that are on the committee and by the school committee. And what I haven't seen is anything to really guide me to decide if we're making the right decisions or not in that little sequestered room where we're supposed to be sweating the details. I don't know what are the right things to be thinking about. So what I would ask of the school committee in terms of guidance is really, what are the district's goals? What are we trying to accomplish with this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? So that I can basically try to evaluate from my perspective and my level, if I think the plans being presented or the options that we have to consider, like which one's the best one. And I'd like to be personally comfortable enough with whatever that option we pick to stand up and tell the school committee why I think it's the right one, because it satisfies goal number 1, goal number 2, goal number 3. It minimizes this other stuff over here, and it maximizes that, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, I have no way to evaluate what would be presented by anybody. And that one thought that struck me, because I did look through the presentation from last week, and I could see enrollment projections and things trying to balance out. I did see something about a 3-track desire, but that wasn't there in one of the schools. And suddenly this week that's been addressed. And oh, by the way, we now decided to push the kindergarten kids, pre-K, whatever, into the trans building because it allows access for this early curriculum education path to occur, which sounds like a great idea. But that wasn't on the table last week, and it seems like it should have been, because it sounds like a great idea. So I have trouble evaluating what the real objectives are, and I'd like to see what that list is. If it's like, no school shall have less than 3 tracks, okay, there's something I can evaluate. If it's every school should have a learning community, 1 per grade per school, okay, I can evaluate that. Is redistricting okay? I can evaluate that. What are the rules that I need to follow? Along with, if these visions are constrained to elementary, okay. If they should, transpire through the whole school system here, middle school, high school, I'd like to know that too, because as people have expressed here, geez, I think, with enough of the firepower that we have in terms of people designing, constructing, and building, we can say, well, if we have to plan for a few other remodeled rooms, that's X dollars per square foot. Squirrel that away for 2030 when we can do that. If it's this stuff that needs to get done here, we can estimate that. If it's brand new construction, we can estimate that. So at least you've bucketed, something that achieves some sort of goals that I have that I can evaluate and then stand up in front of you and say, hey, I think this is the best plan that satisfies everybody and is the right thing to do for the taxpayers and the future generations of children for this town. That's what I would like to see from the school committee tonight, is some sort of objectives that the representatives on the building committee that represent educators in the school committee can tell me that here's what we're doing and why we're doing it.
We'll
Thank
make
you.
sure the superintendent and those on the committee convey that. Mr. Shaw, and then we'll take a vote.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to expand on my last comment as to a question for Louis. As far as the funds go, as discussions are being made in the building committee, because there were identifiers of needs of safety, health, all these other things, and then again that bucket of 21st century learning, right, that gave us the additional reimbursement. When decisions are being made with a broader picture, just looking at that, it's my understanding that you're going to stay within the parameters of the money that was allocated for those other things are going to stay for the safety, the wellness, and nothing's going to shift. Is that true? Is that a true statement? Could we, as the building committee pieces together the master plan, say that wall's on the list, that wall's getting fixed. Well, that wall doesn't stand a chance to get removed from the list just because one of these classrooms, these Da Vinci classrooms, need to be built at the high school that wasn't in consideration. You know what I'm saying? Are the buckets that were identified, that when we went out and advocated for the 83 million, obviously we had that number came from somewhere. Do they stand the chance of being removed and would ride? Because if you look, because based on the percentage of what you get for 21st century and what you get, say, for safety and wellness, if it's the same percentage, one could say, well, if we take this off the table and we're adding this at the same cost, we're still going to get the same money, but that wall won't be fixed. You understand what I'm asking? So does that stand, so is it true that those that were identified outside the 21st century will still remain on the list regardless of what the discussion is as far as this goes?
So let me just start by clarifying the perception that magically over the weekend we came up with this other option. That other option was driven by the fact that you had basically asked us to add 5 additional classrooms at Ashton, and we became concerned with the budget. And so we looked for options of how to provide the 3 tracks, a good environment for the pre-Ks, and try to control the budget. So the project goals, I think it's excellent point to make sure that the building committee clearly understands that. As I understand them, there's 3 basic components that drive the project goals. One is the life and health safety issue. And in all of our discussions with all the 21st century learning environment and additions, we have never considered not possibly doing the ones that are required. There is this process that's taking place, and that we need to verify the Jacobs report and make sure that that's required, and we propose doing it correctly. So that's the big bucket. The second goal is to ensure that we adequately provide space for the projected enrollments. And the third one is the introduction of 21st century learning. Now, so and I'm not sure if the building committee is even aware that there's an educational master plan that was developed that outlines all of the goals that the district identified during the visioning sessions for this 21st century learning. So that information, the rest of it is pretty subjective. There's a list of deficiencies. We need to address them. There's been a peak enrollment identified per school. We need to address that, and we need to enhance all our schools to provide 21st century education. The issue at the high school was that, you know, people were conscious that it had undertaken a major redevelopment recently. And the main goal was to make sure that we provided the academic spaces to implement the CTEs that this school was visioning.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Salvatore to table. We have a second by Mrs. Friedman. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Mr. Salvatore? Yes. Table. Mrs. Bernardo? Yes. Mrs. Waters? Yes. Mrs. Friedman? Yes. Mr. Fiorello?
Nay.
Nay. Mr. Hess?
Aye.
And chair votes no, so it passes 5-2. We'll let the building committee, is there, actually, he's asking the question, when do we table it to? Table it to?
My recommendation is let it go to the building committee, and then it can come back to us. And we can set a meeting within 48 hours.
All right, thank you. So it passes 5-2. Thank you, everyone. Motion by Mr. Fiorello, second by Mr. Hess to adjourn. All in favor?
You have public comment, Mr. Chairman?
Was there public comment on the agenda? There is, all right, agenda, so yes, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I'd just like to recognize Mr. Hess. This might be, is this your last meeting, Mr. Hess? Oh, you do? When's that? I'll be there at that one.